how do we do coalition building throughout Tennessee, Middle Tennessee at this point? Well, I'm not a real stickler when it comes to Democrats and Republicans. There was a conservatives. I focus on the issues because I think in a place like Nashville, when you have all that national media painting that picture and somebody identifies as a conservative, it automatically maybe makes you maybe have some type of implicit bias against that person, thinking like, oh, they fit into this box, right? Or vice versa if you're a Democrat, and if you're a conservative looking at a Democrat, right? In Nashville, you might say, oh, okay, this person believes these things on all these issues, which may not be the case. How do we do this coalition building, right? When you have liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans, or moderates, whoever you are, but we know we need to work together and really to build out whether it's in the inner city, suburban, or rural areas. How can people get involved in that, or what are tactics or strategies that you've noticed that worked through your organizing team?
Well, let me answer it this way. I think that the social justice groups that I know personally, that I follow, even though there may be kind of a publicly facing ideological anchor, we believe this. In terms of doing the day-to-day blue-collar work of trying to get policy passed, there's actually some pretty good work that deals with building bipartisan relationships. And although the state has taken a step backwards on criminal justice, from 2015 to probably 2020, the legislation that we got passed in Tennessee around criminal justice reform, around the work of Free Hearts, for example, the work of No Prisoners Exceptions Collective when they were on the ground running, the work of ACLU and League of Women Voters and all these groups like that. They were actually doing a pretty good job building out bipartisan coalitions. And I think in a way that has been, in many respects, undervalued. I do think that, I guess the second way I would respond to that would be that we do have some examples of groups, I think, at least maybe they're kind of, progressive, liberal, if I can use those words. I try to stay away from those words too. But there are some examples of at least multiracial coalitions in Middle Tennessee that I think are effective in Nashville. I think whether or not we find the group of the Nashville Justice League, Turk, Equity Alliance, we find all those groups doing that. Whether or not that will carry to Murfreesboro, for example, or Columbia or Maury County, then that's the larger question. But the third thing I think, which gets to the heart of your question, I think is, look, here in Tennessee, we've had a lot of losses, and we've been hit in the mouth by very kind of entrenched right-wing authoritarianism, however you want to describe it. But I think from my perspective, what the so-called social justice or progressive community, or I would just probably use a term that James Lawson uses, which is people of goodwill. It's probably a better term. Should do is to do and maybe an after-action analysis of what victories. What victories took place? Why did they take place? Or what near victories took place, and how they took place? And I'm thinking, just to give you a few examples, we had the first black lawmaker elected out of Clarksville, a Democrat, been elected by several hundred votes since Reconstruction.
Wow.
Yeah, and there are multiple groups involved in that, from the NACP with Jimmy Garland in Clarksville to, I think Turk was down there, to moderate and progressive whites. But to explain how that happened, we had in Murfreesboro, we had a young African-American member of the LGBT community who lost the election from a graduate from MTSU, but came fairly close to winning. In Rutherford County, we had a black woman elected to the Rutherford County Commission in a surprise upset in a district that 4 or 5 years ago she would have lost. We had in the state, some years ago, Governor Bill Haslam made a decision to privatize all state facilities, including state universities, parks and recs, and the United Campus Workers, which stretched from East Tennessee State University in Knoxville and UT all the way to Memphis, built out a coalition between urban and rural, and also between across races, to push back and defeat the governor on that.
Yeah.
Which you couldn't just do by relying upon old partisan tropes.
Right.
It had to deal with, you had to build multiracial coalitions.
Right.
You had to find common ground, probably with state workers who were moderates, or maybe in some cases were conservatives. So but the challenge is that we talk about so much about doom and gloom, and fighting off the kind of oppressive mountain, but we're not doing enough to figure out, in those places that we are winning, how do we do it?
Right.
And then, or those places in which there are near wins, how do we do it?
Right.
We've had, to your point, the biggest coalition, although that is, I think, one of the biggest coalitions in Tennessee has been the fight for, initially the fight to save TennCare back in 2004 or 5, TennCare Medicaid.
Yeah.
That is extended into the fight to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, or a Medicaid-like program. That coalition was partly led by rural, working class, and poor whites who teamed up with, progressives and so forth.
Right.
And they did finally get Governor Bill Haslam then to commit to creating a Medicaid-like program, although the state legislature came in and overturned that.
Yeah.
But so that we have these examples of what you're describing, but we just haven't articulated those examples. We haven't studied enough as to why those examples are successful.
Yeah.
And those examples are not part of our publicly facing narrative.
Yeah.
Publicly facing narrative. I mean, those examples are not part of our stories in Tennessee.
Right.
What's part of our story is, civil rights, as it should be. Definitely, I'm a nerd on that.
Yeah.
What's part of our story is the authoritarianism of the state, right? But what's not part of our story is how we're winning in some places, or we're coming to near victories, and how those wins essentially look a little bit differently than what we think it does, and it tells multiracial groups, biracial coalitions, and maybe building alliances that might be ad hoc or temporary, but nonetheless